Hi, my name is David Rodriguez, and my assigned chapter for application presentation 2 is chapter 15. Chapter 15 is Petty and Cacioppo's elaboration likelihood model. Their model is concerned with how people are persuaded by speech through peripheral routes or central routes. Central routes are routes of thinking that involve concrete facts and ideas, and peripheral routes are routes of thinking that involve emotional appeal and the like. Specifically, I'm going to focus on Nilsson's significant choice idea, wherein he is concerned with how ethical strong persuasion is. In my life, I was trained very heavily in customer service through Starbucks. And through the literature, I was persuaded very, very heavily to want to serve and connect with customers above all else. I noticed, though, that not everyone I worked with was persuaded as heavily as I was. I don't know whether I decided to be persuaded, and since I was persuaded, I don't know if it was on the central route or the peripheral route. I do know, though, that there are some things in my life that cause me to have emotional reactions to wanting to connect with customers, because I grew up in a really large family and I was the youngest and I had to serve everyone. I think it's interesting to see, however, that not everyone chose to do what I did. People maintained their free will, in that not everyone was persuaded by the Starbucks training literature to serve customers blindly and give them whatever they want, basically. I think it's important to think about free will and whether or not listeners maintain free will when they're listening to persuasive speech. In my example, free will was maintained by the listeners. Not everyone chose to do the same thing. They chose to do what they thought would be best. I think Nilsson would be glad to see that free will was maintained in the situation and that people were not blindly persuaded or all equally persuaded. On a side note, though, I'm not sure if everyone being persuaded would be a bad thing. I think Nilsson, at least the text, doesn't really talk about Nilsson's thoughts on everyone being persuaded, but it's still being a result of free choice. Either way, in general, I think it's very important to consider how persuasive speech, not just speech, but language in general, can affect the choices you make, and to be certain that you maintain your free will in those choices. I think a lot of people are very easily persuaded, not just through the central route, rather not just through peripheral routes, but also a lazy trip down the central route, even though the central route is supposed to be the route where we make the right decision. Because persuasion can be so effective when the peripheral route is targeted. I think it's very important to ensure that free will is maintained.